You digested that
Yeah,
acquisition.
yeah. It's interesting. Consolidation is happening in the industry, yeah.
Consolidation.
Yeah. Happens.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have Paul here.
Yeah,
And-
it is 4 though. You
Is
do
it
have a
4?
quorum, so,
It's
yeah.
4.
Yeah.
Should I go ahead and
I think
get
so.
going?
Let's go ahead, yeah.
Okay, everybody, it's Monday at 4 o'clock, August 11. We'll call to order this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Holland Board of Public Works. Janet, roll call, please.
Thompson,
Here.
Maloof,
Here.
Ingers, Lilly, Lynn,
Here.
Corbin,
Here.
Van Beek, Couch,
Here.
We have a quorum. Could we have a motion on the agenda?
Move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Lynn, second by Maloof. Any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. At this time, we'll open the meeting to communications from the audience. We provide a period where anybody from the audience can communicate with the board requesting you state your name and address for the record and adhere to a 5-minute limit. Any communications from the audience today? Hearing none, we'll close communications to the audience and turn it over to our general manager.
All right, good afternoon. We have consent agenda this afternoon comprises 6 items. Item A is a request to approve the minutes of the July 7 regular meeting and the July 28 study session. Item B is a request to accept for information the city council action consenting to the assignment of institutional custody account agreements from Huntington to Argent International Trust Company. I'm sorry? Institutional custody account agreements. Thank you, Chuck. Item C is to approve an easement for fiber infrastructure with Holland Public Schools, subject to approvals to form. Item D is to approve an easement for water and sewer with Jubilee Ministries, also subject to approvals to form, I believe, on that one as well. Item E is request to approve a purchase order in the amount of $147,712 for a Versalift telescoping bucket truck for the broadband department. That is a budgeted item. Item F is a request to approve a change order in the amount of $489,300 with Inland Waters Pollution Control for completion of the A, B, and C trunk sewer lining project. And again, this is a bid project previously last year that was phased, and so this is the second phase of that we're letting through this change order is the plan here. So those are the items on the consent agenda this afternoon.
Any questions on the consent agenda items? Dave, we had the advantage of hearing a little bit deeper explanation on the budgeting situation with the sanitary sewer lining project.
Yes.
Could you kind of help us or just go through that?
Oh,
one more
yeah,
time?
actually, what we're gonna hear more, I think what I gave you the
Oh,
benefit
I'm
of,
sorry.
that's coming up under item 6A,
Okay,
PJ, that's
great,
a little
great.
bit more. This one is set in the budget, no
Okay.
amendment needed here, this was
Yeah.
just a letting of that
Okay,
contract. for
sorry
this one.
to.
Nope,
sorry
you're
about
fine,
it.
thank you for that. Yep.
Any other questions on the consent items? Can we have a motion?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Support. Motion by Malou, supported by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approves. So now to regular items?
Yeah, down to actually major project update real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
That's okay. I'm gonna just point out again that on our board SharePoint page now, we have access to the live data that's here. So hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it. Because of that, I want to give a couple of items of note here real quick. First of all, there were a couple items that were updated today that I'll pay particular attention to. The water reclamation facility disinfection project. The site geotechnical work is to begin tomorrow. along with an evaluation of any site buried structures, the investigation of that. And then the structure A out back here, the heating and insulation project there, the permitting has begun on that, and we've also got a service application for natural gas underway there. The other things I'd note in terms of, I guess, major milestones here, the fiberhood number 7 fulfillment services have begun now. Customer count is up to about 2,300 as of the beginning of August, so that's good news, making progress there. Secondly, the SCADA and OMS projects for surveillance, those are actually live now, so that's good news. And then going down the list a little ways to the water reclamation facility, again, the raw pumps. Those replacements are set to begin startup activities this week. So good milestone there on the raw pump project as well. So if anybody had any questions on the others, I'd be happy to address them. But again, consistent with what we talked about, that since they're being made available to you, we're going to try to do more of a by exception sort of report here today for this one.
Yeah, that's great.
Very
If
good,
there are
thanks.
no questions, yeah, we can move on then to the regular items. First one is one we were just kind of chatting about here a little bit, PJ, the water meter and radio replacement contract. This is one of 3 major projects for the water utility, and actually meters also affect the wastewater utility because we share in that with the wastewater utility because of the fact that water meters are used as a billing determinant for wastewater in most months except for the irrigation demand season, for example. We bonded for these 3 major projects recently with the lake crossing repair, the chemical storage, and then this metering effort is really the last piece of that. And Pete Byer is here to walk you through the specifics of this solicitation for proposals, as well as information as you were talking about with regard to the request for a budget amendment and what's really kind of driving that in this particular case here. So Pete, I'll turn it over to you for that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so if you remember a couple months ago, we brought to you the purchase orders for the meters and the MTUs, the meter data transmitting units. I'm happy to report that we have the MTUs in the warehouse and the meters are going to be delivered this week at some point. So all the hardware is showing up, which is great news. So this is the final piece of the puzzle here, which is the installation services themselves. This is something that we've been working on since our tactical action a few years ago and have been engaging with a couple different vendors on this front to get estimates. We have a baseline from when we did Park Township, but for the original budget estimates and to establish the value of the bond, we had some early conversations with Aclara, who is our AMI system vendor, so the vendor that has the radio network and the MTUs. We got some budget estimates from them early on that included the meter replacement and were to include the wire as well between the meter and the MTU, and then the MTU replacement as well. So we went ahead and procured the bond and put budgets in place based on those estimates. We found out after talking further with them that they omitted the wire work from their original estimate, and so we had to go back to them and get a new estimate that included that wire work. Their new estimate came in considerably higher than the first one that we got from them, to the tune of just shy of almost $500,000. It's quite a bit of work to do the wire work, so that's where some of this budget discussion comes into play. When we discovered the magnitude of the difference, we went out and got additional quotations from Ferguson. Ferguson is the vendor that supplies the meters, and typically you try to work with one of the two for the installation service so there's familiarity with not just the hardware but the installation process themselves. We got a competitive quote from Ferguson for these services that was less than the Aclara by some margin, but also included additional services at that cost. So Ferguson is I don't know if they're international, but they're definitely a nationwide supplier for waterworks. They have extensive resources in-house to assist utilities with these sorts of projects. And so they're bringing additional staff on board compared to Aclara for a lower cost to help us with this project. And so those factors, in addition to the slightly lower cost based on the updated scope, led us to having a recommendation here for Ferguson performing this work, or Ferguson being the general to perform this work. Ferguson sat down with us and we had a lengthy conversation to understand the challenges we had in our previous meter replacement project, where we really wanted to focus on quality this time around. And they interviewed a lot of vendors to perform the installation services and had a proposal where UMS does the boots on the ground installation, and they provide the general contracting and the project oversight. UMS is one of the largest meter replacement contractors in the United States and has extensive experience with Aclara as well, which is one of the things that we really wanted to focus on, that they knew how to program these units, they knew how to work in the software, and that was kind of one of our lessons learned from our previous project. The budget aspect of this is that this is a multi-year project. We didn't know exactly going into this which vendor we would end up with and how long it would take them to complete the work. So from a budget standpoint, we spread the spend over multiple fiscal years in terms of when the hardware was going to show up, when they were going to start the work, and when they were going to complete it. So in the budgets, there was funding in FY -- 26, and 27 to represent that spend. We're now at the point where we can recommend this contract with Ferguson for the work, but in order to approve a contract here in FY '26, we have some spend represented in FY '27 that needs to get pulled forward for the contract approval. But with an 11-month implementation estimate, we don't anticipate that the spend is going to change from what we had projected previously. So this is a budget amendment for a contract approval and not to pull forward monies for immediate spending. So the recommendation that you have here today is for a budget amendment, let me get the numbers correct here, in the amount of $1,080,179.80 in each the water and wastewater utility, because this is split between both. That brings it to a total FY '26 budget amendment of $2.16 million to approve this contract. One other item of note, I guess, is that this is a capital budget amendment. There's a portion of this that is going to be expensed, where they do cross-connection surveys and then also the verification of the water service line material. So those are both regulatory programs that we need to fulfill, and so that portion of the budget will be expensed. So there's a small portion here that won't be going to capital. The capital portion of the overall work will be about $4.3 million when we're all done, and then about $147,000 going to expense.
So just to summarize again, budgets that we had created for this year, next year, or 25, 26, 27, totaled about $3.8 million.
Correct, based on the original estimates
Right.
that we got.
The 500,000 change, again, as Pete first said, had to do with the fact that the Aclara estimate they had given us for budgeting purposes omitted that wire work. And so that's really what kind of put us in the situation. The rest of that is really a matter of pulling that forward to make sure that we have total budget authority established within fiscal '26 to do the entire job. And so, not that we didn't intend on spending $3.8 million, we did. It's just the part that's different really is the 500,000 that was associated with the omission from the information that came from Aclara when we were going through the budget determination process.
Yeah, so the plan is that we will be starting relatively soon here. There's some work that we have to do to install modules on our billing system to allow the exchange of data. These are the meters that are retiring. These are the new meter numbers coming in. We're kind of in the final phases of that. The contractor is ready to go as soon as we're ready to go. We're hoping sometime in the October timeframe potentially we'll have kind of their first set of crews on the ground, kind of testing things out, making sure everything works. And then working in earnest kind of through the winter period and through the majority of next year to complete the work.
I have a question. With the change in the metering system to the Aclara system, the radio network that brings all this stuff back here, does that change or is it all the same?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and something I should be pointing out. So we currently operate the water meters on two different radio systems. We have Aclara, and then we also are piggybacking on the electric radio system, Landis and Gear. One of the goals of this project is to get down to one system so we don't have to administer both, and that will be the Aclara system. So there are some regions in kind of the southern and eastern portions of Holland that are currently predominantly on the Landis system. And so as we replace meters in those areas, there's some slight expansion that we need to do with some additional radio collection points that'll be installed just to get better coverage out there. We have coverage right now, but we like to have redundancy in that coverage in case one of those units goes down. So we'll be installing about 7 or 8 additional radio points to expand that coverage a little bit. We're also currently on premise with our data, and we're moving to a hosted solution. Primarily, right now, the sync process out in the field, when a radio is programmed and MTU is programmed, we accumulate those throughout the day and we sync them when we get back. And so if there was any error, we don't find out until the end of the day. When we are doing, 9,000 of these, we really need to know as it's happening. And so we're moving to a hosted environment for kind of a quality control standpoint. And also it reduces the potential for a secondary appointment with a customer to go and fix something. So that's the only other component that is going live this week, actually. So.
Thanks.
Dave, if I could ask kind of a finance question, this is one of those things that covers 2 utilities.
Correct.
And, the utilities have to do their own thing. They have to be
Yeah.
self thing.
Yes.
When you do the bond that
Yeah.
finances all this stuff,
Yeah.
does that bond come from one utility?
It did, but we only bonded the water portion of the responsibility for this project. Cash from reserves is paying for the wastewater
Oh, okay.
contribution to
Yeah.
this. So there's no cross
You don't
contribution.
do a loan or a.
No, not in this
or-
particular case.
no.
There's nothing there really kind of bridging between those 2 enterprises.
Okay.
Wastewater's bringing its own cash forward. It didn't have to bond because of its reserve condition. Was able to do that versus the water utility because of the extent of the projects in total that are going on. We did issue the revenue bond to support the water's contribution to it. Yeah.
From the wastewater, does that come from the plant replacement fund?
Not plant, no, this would
No?
be more from, because it's dealing with metering, which is a retail, service territory issue, not a wholesale impacted sort of the whole plant.
Yep.
And so, no, it's just taken from the wastewater reserves, not the equipment replacement fund.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
We ready for a motion on the recommendation?
Motion to approve the fiscal year budget amendment for the water meter and radio replacement contract as stated.
If you can, just add on the Ferguson contract as
well. Oh, as well? And approve the contract with Ferguson Waterworks in the amount of $1,360,990.10, pending approval as to form.
Support.
Motion by Malou, support by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Pete. All right, second item today is a continuation of discussion and hopeful action on your part today with regard to the discussion we started last month on the pool. This opportunity that we have to join a larger insurance pool for health coverage, something the city and the BPW both have been exploring for a while. And today we have for you a resolution that is in the packet that we'll be asking for your approval of. But before we do that, I'll have Becky kind of walk through the presentation. We had hoped to have costs today. We'd have hoped to have first year costs. We do not yet have first year costs. But again, remember that this is really an approval of a concept of how we're moving forward, and based upon the prior experience, the economy of scale that we get from this, the diversity of risk that we are able to get through the larger pool, and how that yields benefits on the elimination of stop loss coverage that we've been paying separately for. So it really is something, again, that we're moving forward in concept, but we hope to very soon have specific costs, hopefully by the time the city takes action later this month. But Becky, I'll turn it over to you with more description of the recommendation.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a more large presentation about what the proposal is, and had a guest here from the pool answering some questions for everybody. Just to All right. Reiterating just a little bit the path that we've taken, we've been self-funded for several years, and that's worked out reasonably well for us. Got into the knowledge of the pool being available to us as a public entity, and saw that there were some advantages for taking the action of becoming a member of that pool. So just kind of refreshing our memory on that, looking at mostly the important part, I would say, is the benefits that we get not only by being part of a larger pool, but also the savings that we could experience. So taking a look at, based on the numbers that we know, I'm looking at the prior year to some current year information, roughly around 9% or about $500,000 that comes from those administrative fees, the refunds from prescriptions, as well as the premium for the stop loss is covering the gist of what we would see or would expect to see for savings as far as the joining the pool is concerned. It is managed by Gallagher Benefit Services, so there's a couple of action items for you guys today. In front of you is adopting that resolution, which allows for us to become a member of the pool. The second action is approving the business associate agreement with Gallagher Benefit Services, and that's you probably saw in the packet, there's lots of words and lots of pages for that, along with their bylaws that give us the detail of what it is they do and how they operate, primarily related to some of the HIPAA laws and things of that nature. So does anyone have any questions?
If I could just add on a couple things before questions, maybe try to answer a couple things additional. One, for those that are, maybe didn't have the benefit of sitting in on the study session and maybe listening, maybe other employees even that are listening, I think one of the important things here too to note is that our relationship with Priority Health continues. As an actual plan provider, the type of plans that we have, really nothing really changing anticipated there. This really has to do with just the cost effectiveness to the organization because, as a self-insured entity, at some point we had to find another carrier essentially to take on additional risk if there was an exceptionally large loss from an individual perspective in a year. And now with this larger diversity of risk that the pool is able to take on, that becomes a more cost-effective situation. But for those that are receiving service, this really looks like no change at all, to our employees. There really is the ability to still get the same kind of coverages, and I think that's really important to understand as well. So the other thing I would point out here is that we can, in that third paragraph from the bottom there, we can actually, and we are recommending that the BPW and city join the pool as separate entities. I think that's a good thing too, as it relates to the fact that we have separate workforces, separate different expected potential impacts from a health perspective long term could come from that, but also just the marketing of our positions and the market forces in which we're recruiting are different. So as we look at types of coverages in the future and things like that, we may have to be looking at diversion, at particular cases, and able to do that through a pool situation where we can craft a particular set of coverages that are different. So it gives us the ability to sort of operate independently as it relates to what are the drivers that are influencing our business environment from either the city's operation or the BPW. So we think this is a good direction as well. So that's just something else I want to point out in that.
And I would support everything that Becky and Dave just said. I wasn't able to participate, but there was a call this morning with the provider of the pool. So probably the only difference is getting the illustrated rates, yet they're still digging through a lot of data. And one of the things they're still making a determination on is the history of those rates. So as we go into different entities, at what point will we have the same illustrative rates? And then when would our illustrative rates start being different that depends on the experience of our different population. And I think they're still sorting through some of that
Yeah.
and
I
exactly
do
how
think
that will work.
anyway that I've
We're
heard
probably gonna go in together.
we're going in kind of the same amount, even though as separate entities, we'll have the
and
same
over
first year.
time Will
Right,
diverge.
yeah. Some sort of experience will take us one direction or the other. Call it a friendly competition.
And it's an actual equity piece that you take here, is it
Well,
not?
I mean,
Being a member?
we I don't know if there's so much a equity piece like we had in the previous situation where we had a pool of funds that were brought forward from both entities, and that's another issue really that we need to discuss is that once the pool is set and we're in that, these funds that we have sort of created for our self-insurance pool that we've had between us and the city, those will become available to us generally for use within our two parts of the organization. Our thought is to leave those alone for a period of time to see what the experience is, see what happens to our premiums, help sort of manage any sort of significant adjustments that do come to that for the benefit of our employees, because they ultimately were helping to pay into that as well, to create it and to keep it. And so, you know, that's kind of our thought process on that. But here, you know, you really are getting a status of a member that's making decisions because it is a member-owned. It is, I guess, in a way, equity, although I don't see ourselves like having like a bricks and mortar sort of ownership of anything. It's more a matter of, as a member, we get to make the decisions ultimately about who we elect to an executive committee, who ultimately is making the decisions on all the administrator functions and how the pool actually operates. So yes, we'll have a lot of say through our membership that we'll have in the pool. I think that is important to note.
Yeah, and I would say we have so many great examples as we're the same and yet we're not, but we certainly are great partners, that the shared cost of so many things that we do is just based upon the best data. And I think that's basically what we're looking for, is that over time, what we both respectively pay into the pool will be based upon the claims that we've had over the past number of years by our employees and their families. So the pool and their consultant will help us determine that, and then we'll make those determinations based upon data, which is, I think, the way we all agree it should be.
Yeah.
Kind of when we talked about it in the study session, if it is a small equity, does that grow in value? Does it provide any cash distributions or anything
Not
like
really,
that?
no. I mean, our situation is this: the pool has to be made whole for what it's kind of managing for all of its members, right? And so everybody has different experience rates in terms of the actual health usage, health fund usage. So, you know, we'll be measured against all these other participants in terms of what our impact is, and we'll have adjustments made over time to our costs that we're paying in. But it doesn't really like create a surplus fund or anything like that. It's more just that there's a trajectory you're going to be on over time, and that trajectory can change based upon how well your health is managed inside your organization. And that's why we encourage our employees, just as we do today. The good news is those decisions that you make about, you know, your prescription medication choices, you know, shopping around for procedures and for doctors, all still has an impact on what the BPW's experience rate is going to be inside this pool, and therefore what the illustrative rates that come back to us and are actually charged to us, and therefore 20% passed on to our employees is they have a say in that, right? So they have influence on that. So the good news is with this, just as it was with the self-insured, our employees can still have an effect through their wise decision making on what the cost of their health care is going forward.
We ready for a motion?
Motion to accept the recommendation to adopt a resolution to join the Western Michigan Health Insurance Pool for a period of not less than 3 years, subject to approval as to form by the city attorney. Approve a business associate agreement with Gallagher Benefit Services, subject to approval as to the form by the city attorney.
Support. Motion by Malou, support by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's approved.
Thanks, Becky. All right, I'll get back to the agenda here, and no other business from the staff this afternoon. So if there's nothing from the board needed there, I can move on to item 8 if you'd like. So,
Please.
item 8, just note a few things here for you this afternoon. First thing is our next meeting is Monday, August 25. That is a study session. Just a reminder, we'll be continuing our work on governance policies. So again, the homework assignment last time was to try to dig out through the SharePoint page those governance policies, the big G category of governance policies. If you have any difficulties, please reach out to Janet or to reach out to me. Let me know if you're having trouble with that. We're going to just walk through the purpose of each of those briefly next time and see if anybody had any questions or comments on those, or if anything needs to be brought up for potentially editing and approval of a change. Also, we'll be talking to the board about a little bit of a review on our energy waste reduction programs. We may have some things to share with you as it relates to the success of that, but also we're building into this next year under the energy law in Michigan of having to file an updated energy waste reduction program that's compliant with that law and has different goals in mind based upon the law's requirements, including things like the low income programs. And so we're still trying to get some more information on that and clarification, but it is there are some fairly significant changes and requirements as it relates to that law. So we'll give you a little bit of an update of where things stand there. Also, wanted to update you real quick on water demand. Actually had a chance to speak to TV8 last week on this issue. Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for passing it along. So I thought and that was probably no problem for you to pass that along, right? And so a couple of graphs here of interest, I think. First one is just showing kind of the water demand by day, and I don't know if I remember such consistency in these water graphs. First of all, thank you to Nate Johnson for this one, and the next one I'll show is Pete Byer here in a minute gave us. But way of looking at this is kind of interesting because I think people were trying real hard to keep their lawns green in June and July. And it's kind of interesting, if you look at a little bit of a waning effect in August here, maybe a little bit of recovery in that, but there may be a situation where people have sort of given up. I know in some lawns I've passed, it certainly seems like they have. So we're staying fairly well controlled. That bottom line is at 75% of plant capacity. So we just had one day here late in July where we kind of tripped up into that 85%. Now one day on a situation where Holland is experiencing the largest drought in 120 years isn't going to trip up anything with regard to the need for expansion of that plant or anything like that. But it is certainly important for us to continue our education work and work with our customers to try to find demand management solutions. This is one way of representing it. The other is kind of interesting cumulative effect over the year. If you go to that next graph, please, Becky. And thanks to Peter on this one. How we started out the year kind of behind some of the other years, but have sort of quickly ramped up during the summer. What also is interesting about this graph, I found really interesting, if you look at the end point, how uniform that growth is by the end of the year in total. Given where we're headed this summer, unless there's a major course correction as it relates to the precipitation situation here in Holland, I think we'll end up fairly high, again, higher than the red line. You probably noticed 2022 is omitted there. There were some data issues in 2022, but still kind of interesting how just uniform it is. And what we want to see in total, we want that base to grow. We just want to also control that peak as we're doing that to try to preserve, our asset and not have to expand it in terms of the water treatment plant. So a couple interesting graphs here I wanted to share with you this afternoon on that. Also, as it relates to water, the third item I had was that the funds from PFAS settlements now have begun to flow a little bit. 3M and DuPont, again, reminder that that's about $3.2 million in total. The first flow of funds from 3M should be coming in this week if it hasn't already hit. We had a test deposit last week to show that they could hit our books fine, and that number I think is around, was it about 581,000 or something like that? I think it is. It's coming in this week. Those amounts will start to come in over this next year, and a great amount of it will come in over the next year, but there will be some residual amounts that come in after this year as well. So stay tuned on that. We'll be representing that on our financial statements. Matter of fact, we probably show the receivables already on the financial statements, I believe. I'm looking around here, but I think that's the case. And then also just letting you know, this is more for information because it's not anything you really control. At this point, you sort of controlled it by not opting out of the state's program for energy assistance. But the requirement for staff now is for us to place on these bills by September 1. For the September 1 bills, we'll be beginning the LIHEAP surcharge as the state has mandated. And so that begins on for September 1 bills, and I think for this year, again, Ted, that's $1.25, is that right? $1.25 per meter will go on the electric bills as part of the LIHEAP Energy Assistance Fund creation at the state. And then finally, item E for me, the next item I have is really that energy saving trees have all been reserved. They are, that is a very attractive program. Now, I don't know if that means that some trees have died for people this year, and but it's a very attractive program, and so all of those trees have been reserved. A reminder that pickup is Saturday, September 13, from 9 a.m. to noon. Also, if you're coming down for one of your trees, or if you otherwise are interested in one of the plants, the native plants that we also have available, those plants would be on a first come, first served basis that same day. So come on down to the BPW Service Center to check that out if you're interested on September 13. But trees have to have been reserved ahead of time, and they all are reserved at this point. So just plants are for purchase. Yes, they are purchased. I think, is it $3 a plant or something? Okay, it's a very reasonable price. They're not free though. Yes, thank you. That's all I have this afternoon.
Thanks. Any communications from the board?
I just have a question on the water graphs in the Eagle 80%, 90%.
Yeah.
How does that reporting, how does that occur? Is it voluntary that we say, oh, gee, we're hitting it or not? Or do they get data from us? How's
You
that
want to
work?
grab it, Mike? You could probably talk better about it than I could. I know we file reports with Eagle all the time, so that's.
Yeah, we have monthly operating reports that we send into Eagle that will have all that information.
Okay.
So those conversations come up with Eagle when they're in the plant visiting. Usually the biggest conversation, we do these sanitary surveys. I think you've probably heard of those before, every few years. That's when there's a lot more focused discussion around that. But if they had a concern, they would bring it up sooner based on those monthly operating reports.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you.
Any other communications from the board? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
Motion by Maloof, supported by Lynn. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.